We're here with Steve Bookbinder today. How are you doing, sir? Tell us a little bit about yourself. And I see you've got the echo selling marketing for the book in the background.
Yes, my latest book, which I wrote a few years ago, and I have been training a number of clients on this. And this extends. If you ever took the HubSpot training, I'm featured in their video training series, their certification training, and this extends my feelings about inbound marketing, and also extends how I think that selling has changed. And here's the biggest way that selling has changed. It used to be that business to business buyers might make a decision or they wouldn't, and we call them a decision maker. But now, whether or not you're a so-called decision maker, no matter who you are, even if you're the owner, you're still going to talk to somebody else before you buy something, just the way a consumer would check out the reviews before they buy something. And I call the people that B2B buyers talk to their circle of influence. So
Right.
what we need in sales is to be able to have our customer echo what we said to them when they talk to their circle. We also need to anticipate that that's going to happen and reach out to the circle so that when somebody says, "Hey, did you hear about Steve Bookbinder?" They go, "Oh yeah, I've heard about him," as opposed to, "No, I don't know anything," or "I've heard bad things." So echo selling is how the salesperson echoes their pitch
Right.
to the circle.
So it's the equivalent of like going on a website, looking at the reviews and then seeing exactly what the website claims that it's doing. So let's say a tour guide, for example, saying, "Look, we'll bring you around tours around New York City." I say these are the best tours in the city, etc. And we cover all aspects of the different roads. And then someone goes to the reviews and the reviews say, "Yeah, this is one of the best tours I've ever been on in the city, and we got to see so much that you don't normally get to see." Quite
That's
analogous to that.
exactly right. And
Yeah.
and business to business buyers have been studied, and they determined that they're now it's different than it used to be, 50 to 75% of the way through the buying process before they even talk to a salesperson.
Mm.
So so that changes the game of sales, I think, and
Yeah.
echo selling is the way to solve that problem.
It reminds me of just in general when two humans meet for the first time. It's like first impressions go a long way. Before a substantial conversation's even been had, you already form this view of the person or company that you're speaking to and where you are positioned on how likely you are to like them or purchase what they have to sell.
Right. So those are all the branding measures.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about what you just said is that in the process of learning about the brand without talking to the brand
Uh-huh.
and consulting third-party websites as opposed to their own site, what you end up doing is getting an impression and an opinion and a bias and a filter, which then affects whether or not you'll ever talk to them in person. And even if you do, what you'll be listening for.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're so influenced by the very first review that we see. The
Yeah.
very first review says it's terrible, as opposed to the 10th review that you saw was terrible, changes how you'll view that company
Mm.
psychologically.
It's very interesting. So does that mean then for managing your current customers, it's really about having your solid customer success, making sure that they know who you are even after they've made the purchase, that you maintain a strong relationship with them such that they will echo the positive benefits of your business to potential customers in the future.
Well, from a high level, absolutely. But if you
Mhm.
go just a little bit lower level in there,
Yeah.
when you say talking to your customer, what most people mean by that is they're not talking to the customer. What they're talking to is Joe and Mary, who are two employees who work for that customer. Now,
Right.
maybe that company's got 100,000 employees and you're talking to two. One question I often ask salespeople is, how many people work at that customer? How many of them know you? Yeah. Well, there's 100,000 people. It's a big company. How many know you? 10. Well, what would happen if 50 knew you? But meanwhile, when your customer says, well, I got to talk to my boss, the committee, the others, what does that conversation look like? What does that sound like? Because you're not in the room when that happens. Does it happen at all? Does that a person have any respect when they talk to their boss, or does the boss completely accept everything that they say? So what echo selling really opens the door to is understanding this what is the social, when people talk about we have to socialize this throughout the company, what does that look like? What does that sound like? And when they, here's a question that people should ask when they go, when I got to talk to my boss, or I got to talk to the team. The first question a salesperson should ask is, when you do that, will you be recommending us? And then you kind of have to look to see, what I'm looking for is signs that their hair is on fire with excitement. If they give you, well, I don't want to bias the other person. Hair is not on fire. The reason I mention that is, you know who buys? They say, well, if you can interest the customer, interested people don't buy. You know who buys? Fascinated people whose hair is on fire. Otherwise, they go, it's interesting. Let me think about that. And they never stop thinking about it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So how do you make that happen? How do you make someone go from, interested to fascinated?
Well, it is a function of branding advertising. Branding is 4 things: awareness of the brand, association of the brand and the campaign, how much you like the brand, I just like this person who I've never met, and what would be my likelihood of buying it if I had the need. So if you think about that, those are the 4 levels. So we need to think about that and reach out to people. And I think social media is a great way to do that, to establish that. Not the way most people practice it, though. Here's how most people practice it. The concept of social media is, why don't you get to know the person, learn about them? Just like social media is like walking into a party. You wouldn't walk into a party with a cocktail, walk over to some stranger and go, hey, let me talk to you about insurance. They go, hey, can I schedule an appointment with you to talk about listen, it's a cocktail party. Why don't you call me at the office if you're interested? But that's what we do that's what people do on social media. They walk in, they connect, and the next thing you know, it's a big sales pitch. Yeah. So if you do it that way, then you're missing the opportunity. But if you find a way to get people to be in front of people, get your message in front of them, little by little by little, you have a chance of getting to know them. They know you know them, and then you could offer them things. You can get into conversation with them, and eventually you can position your product or service in the right way. So it's a lengthy process. There's no shortcut to it. What everybody wants is, yeah, that sounds very long. What about a shortcut? Well, the shortcut doesn't work. That's why there's no shortcut to it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's something you're actively doing, right, with your book, and just in general, like you're quite active on social media too, on LinkedIn. So
I am.
How then? What does it look like if we were to break it down step by step? This longer process, like essentially this strategy of slowly putting yourself in front of prospects, so that I guess it's like increasing the amount of touch points you have with them. They've seen your name pop up on LinkedIn. They've maybe seen you in an email. They've seen you on a HubSpot, looking for the tutorials on HubSpot. And they're like, oh yeah, Steve Bookbinder. Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah. No, he's come across quite well. Actually, so he's selling a book. Interesting. I'm gonna have a look at that. So, like, what does that process look like? And let's tailor it to the audience that we have, which is essentially early stage entrepreneurs, founders of companies who are operating in smaller teams. How can they implement that?
I have to give a running start to the answer because it's a big question.
Yeah.
So the short answer to the question is this: the strategy on social media is connect, engage, convert. Connect, engage, convert. In other words, first I've got to connect with you, and if I don't, you won't see the things I post. Who sees the things I post? Only somebody who recently engaged. That's why connecting. So I pick somebody I want, and I have to connect. Engage means literally get them to talk to you, and that process of getting to know them, asking a question, having the patience, listening to their answer, sharing something of value. Every time you share something, you're either sharing something of value or you're effectively asking for money. Most people are asking for money right away. You got to balance it so that you're mostly giving value so that they don't turn a blind eye to you. And if you do that enough, you can eventually successfully convert. Mm-hmm. I mention this because the lack of patience is a problem. But psychologically, there's 2 psychological things that we all know and we forget when it comes to sales. 2 things. One is they say it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, yeah, but it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And it's not just who knows you, but how did you meet? Mm. So if I meet a person by cold calling them on the phone, that's one way of meeting them. If, on the other hand, I knew that you were a member of an association and I found a way to stand to be invited by the chair of that chairman of that a committee of that association, and I spoke to the same group of people, 10 people. I'm standing on stage and you're seated there for a monthly meeting of breakfast, lunch, dinner, coffee kind of a meeting. And the way you met me is through the association. Well, it's still like it's like a phone call, it's like a cold call, but the credibility is much greater.
Yeah.
So we know, so that's a factor in how we process and accept people. The other thing is salespeople are professionally, if you will, and I'm a salesperson too, so I don't want to offend anybody, but we are in the unsolicited advice business. This is what I mean by that. Unsolicited advice is when it's like my mother was a fountain of unsolicited advice. My mother used to give me advice with no prompting. I was once in a sentence, I was talking to her, and I got 2 words into a sentence. I started to say a sentence with the words, my daughter. She cuts me off. She goes, you know what you ought to be saying to your daughter? Right away, she had advice. And salespeople do this all the time. We sit down with total strangers, basically people we don't know, and we go, what do you need? What are your problems? What challenges do you have? What's your pain points? We ask in some way, and we listen. We go, got it. You know what you want to buy? You know what you want to? You know what the solution is? My service. It's like if you only have a hammer, everything is a nail. So I sell training. So I talk to people, and it turns out no matter what their problem is, you know what my solution always is? Why don't we do training? Well, I never say don't do training, do something else, buy some service from some other company. I go, it's good training because that's what I sell. So we're always, who likes unsolicited advice? Nobody. All advice will sound unsolicited unless and until the salesperson slowly over time asks, listens, learns, and then helps. Yep. So if you don't ask and listen and learn and then help, even if the help is exactly the same, if you don't first ask and listen and learn, if you don't put it in that context and in that order, the person misses you. Misses the message. So when I talk about social selling and in order to get in front of people, I'm talking about the social part of it. We will be perceived as having unsolicited advice, of not understanding the customer, of just simply everything's a hammer and I'm going to hit it with my hammer. Everything's a nail. I'm going to hit it with my hammer. We've got to understand that and slowly say to ourselves, who do I want to meet? And if you're starting in a company, here's the way I start. Who do I want to meet? I made my lead list into 4 groups, A, B, C, and D. A being people that like me, which people are more likely to buy, and they have the money and the power to potentially buy from me if they were so inclined. That's A. B is worse than that. C is worse than that. D is worse than that. So you want to make sure that everybody that's in a position that could possibly help you knows what you do. Do not sell directly to them, but just let them know what it is you're doing and, be on top of that. So that's the first. But the second thing is we want to say to ourselves, because that maybe your A list is, maybe you don't have much of an A list. You don't have enough to make customers. Then you say to yourself, who already knows the very people I want to meet? So, for example, when I started this training company, which has evolved in its name and its function, but is now Steve Bookbinder Associates, but over time, it was previously Digital Media Training, and it was a slightly different company, but it was still me running it, but it was more services. When I started that, I was also doing several other businesses, and one of them was I was providing digital marketing help to customers on a consulting basis. Now, why would anybody hire me for digital consult? They wouldn't. They wouldn't even know who I am.
Yeah.
Who already does know the people that I want to meet? Agencies, certain types of ad agencies. So what did I do? The first thing I did is I aligned myself with those agencies. I said, listen, you've got the reach, you've got the connections, I've got a specialty you don't have. Let's find a way to work together. They literally gave me an office. So I had 3 different agencies, and every day I was in a different office, and I would weigh in on the new deals they were pitching, or if they were getting ready to talk to that client about some additional service, they would include me in this. Well, I got entree and access to their customers. This is why I go to trade associations. They already know the people I want. I reach one person who already has a circle of other people. So I reach through the person I have. to the other people I'm trying to reach. So you got to be creative in this way. A previous book I had written is called Leverage Your Laziness, which is not I don't mean lazy in like a morally corrupt way, but I mean in a measure of effort. What you want to do is find the easiest way to get a sale. What's the easiest way to to get a connection? So if you're really, really determined to work hard, you'll cold call your head off, and you should be good at cold calling, and you should do a little bit of that. But if you're leveraging your laziness, you'll say, well, what else could I do to get in front of people? And this notion of networking, in the way I said, is a great way. So when I started my business, every form of networking, not just one, not just cold calling, not just email marketing. In fact, email marketing and cold calling was the icing on the cake. Everything else I did was, I'd spend an hour thinking about who do I send a note to, just asking them if they want to get together for coffee. And, that's such a simple note. You want to get together for coffee. I might write that note for an hour before I settled on 5 words. Let's get together, it's another thing that's different about today's world. Quality is more important than quantity. Reaching out to 10,000 people with one message in today's world could produce a 0% rate of return. But spending an hour thinking about carefully picking the next person I'm going to write, what it is I'm going to say, how will they react, and maybe I should say it this way, and maybe I should test that wording by sending 2 notes, an A and B, into an AB or ABC test. Spending time like that, I can't reach 10,000 people, but I can reach 5 people and close 3 of them if I'm really clever and strategic about the way I do it.
Yeah, that's so true. Because I actually have a friend who exemplifies your point perfectly there. So he didn't use LinkedIn 6 years ago or so. He didn't use LinkedIn, didn't use any social media. Actually, he was very like minimalistic kind of individual, liked to have his peace and quiet away from digital media, computers, and everything. But he was an avid reader, so read a lot of books. And there was a particular author that he really resonated with. It was just more the author's philosophy, the way the person thought, and you just loved the content of the books and thought they had similar life values. Their core values were very much aligned. So he gets the author's email. Bear in mind this is quite a well-selling author, somebody who's got a lot of things to do on a daily basis, and is not going to be someone just responds randomly to a DM. But he picks out this very nuanced point in the book, because they're both Christians. So he picks out this really nuanced point about like a biblical reference the author had made, and he talked about how he found it really interesting, inquired about what that meant to him, told him his view in an email. And long story short, the author eventually became like a father figure to him, invested $350,000 or pounds in his first startup, brought him to live in a villa in Portugal, where he then went skydiving for the next year while building his business.
Wow.
And
great example.
Yeah.
Quality. Yeah. And maybe that same approach, you could say, well, that might not have happened. Yeah, maybe it didn't happen. But if you always think like that, then you increase the odds of that sort of thing happening.
Yeah. And what you're essentially saying there with going to the people who know the people you want to sell to, I think that's really informative for entrepreneurs, because that's effectively, a go-to-market strategy. Who are the sort of, if you want to really intellectualize the language there, who are the distribution partners that can help you get to the market share? Who are the people that you can align yourself with? That, I like how you put it, you have a skill set they don't have, they have a network and reach that you don't have, and together you can kind of come to an agreement and an arrangement to make something happen. But in that case, Steve, was it the case that you were, giving them a share of revenue you'd make through them? How are those kind of arrangements typically structured? Let's say, you find your startup, you find a company or a group of people that are directly related to your target customer. Maybe they already have multiple customers like the ones you want. Do you sort of build a relationship out of good faith? Like you said, people that like you, or where does the commercial side come into that?
Oh, well, I am taking a bet that the thing that I could bring to them is likely to be the thing that they're most interested in. And you know what that is? Most people either don't have enough new customers or new leads or new prospects, or they have run out of things to sell their existing customers and need to find another service. The customer goes, well, what else do you have? Because if you don't have something else, I might move to a competitor. So being able to introduce me also for them becomes an additional look how they're looking out for their customer. They're bringing in new services. They're staying modern. They're staying relevant. So I'm helping them get either more new business or more business from existing customers. And by the way, even if they don't get the business, just the fact that they have a reason to call people and say, hey, the reason I'm calling, I was thinking that you might need some other services based on some other conversations we've had. And I'd like you to meet the Steve Bookbinder guy because he's a new thing. I'm not saying buy. I'm just saying you should meet him and, see if that. So it makes the company I'm dealing with look good, look like their heart is in the right place. And it gives them, because here would be the alternative. The alternative would be there's no Steve Bookbinder to talk about, no other person. So they call their existing customer, having nothing else to say, and go, hi, the reason I'm calling, I don't have that many customers. You're one of them. And frankly, I need more business from you. So would you buy more of my stuff, please? How about if I put it on discount? Would that help? You don't say those words literally, but that's what it ends up sounding like.
Absolutely.
So you need something new to bring to the table all the time. So I become the new thing that they could bring to the table.
Right. So you essentially you're aligning yourself with people that can get immense value from what you're doing, but as well as they're maybe being outcompeted in certain areas in the market, and you're filling that gap.
That's right. So you have to it's three-dimensional chess. I not only have to think about what does the customer need and how could I fill the need, but what is my as you call them, the distribution partner? What do they need, and how can I help them do what they're trying to do? And what they need is different than what the customer needs. But they need something too. So I need to be able to think about that and then have this ability creatively to take my product and service and say, I sell training, but in this scenario, you know what I'm selling? Lead generation. I'm selling help you close more existing business, give you a reason to go wide and deep within your customers. So you have to think more creatively about what you're selling and who you're selling to. And really, you have to think about the people. I was talking to an investor the other day, and he said, what can you do to improve your sales department or sales? And I said, the problem with people, when people talk about sales, they talk about sales like it's chemistry, chemistry works the same way, whether you're doing, a project that's this big or this big. But what's missing is the salespeople. It's not just sales, it's salespeople. Once you add the people part to it, the whole science of selling doesn't work as well as everybody knows all the rules of sales. Yeah. But 80% of customers globally, sales teams globally, salespeople globally, 80% will miss their goal in 2023. So most will miss. And one of the things that most people do, and I'm writing a new book called The Different Manager. In fact, there's a podcast that's kind of giving some of those chapters away, A Different Manager. And it's all about this notion of people confuse most common practice with best practice. They talk about best practice. Well, you know what best practice is? The best practice is to do that. Well, guess what? The best practice, you mean the one that most people do? Well, 80% of them fail. So you know what you don't want to do? Best practice. Because if it's best practice is what's done by the most common practice, then don't do that. Find a different practice. They got to distinguish between those two. So I find I'm typically doing things that people go, yeah, but that's not the way I do it. Yeah, I know. But that's why I'm running a business, and I started with nothing in my kitchen table, and I became a global business. And you're still struggling because I don't do it the way everybody. I sit there going, every customer is going to get a call. If I think they're worth calling, guess who else thinks they're worth calling? Everybody who's selling anything. Yeah. So anybody that's selling anything that's relevant to that same customer is going to call them. So I'm one of 30 salespeople coming in. I've got to separate myself from the pack. If I sound like all the other salespeople, the customer will mistakenly judge a book by its cover. They say, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, which is probably good advice, except here's the only problem with that advice. That's how you judge a book. There is no other way to judge a book then it's cover. That's why books have covers. That's why the publishing company spends more money on the cover than the book, because there's no other way to judge the book than by its cover. So if I've talked to 30 salespeople and 25 of them asked me this stupid questions, and then a 26th person called me up and asked me that same stupid question, even though they don't think it's stupid, in my mind, it's like, that's what everybody, if you're doing that like everybody else, then your product and service is probably just like everybody else's.
Yeah.
So I don't want to buy that. I want to buy the one that's catered, tailored for me. So you have to say to yourself, what's everybody else doing? How could I be different? How could I get their attention? Everybody's busy. Everybody's distracted. Nobody, like that author you said, that author's very busy. So given that he's very busy, what could I do that would be relevant? He's going to get to 10 things this week. How could I be one of those 10 things? And to do that, I may have to displace something else he was planning on getting to.
Yeah.
So I have to think about it. This is what emotional intelligence really is. It's thinking about what's important to the other person.
Yeah.
Also, here's another thing that people don't understand. Most people confuse emotional intelligence with empathy. Empathy is not emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence includes me being able to see myself through your eyes. How are other people viewing me? And can I change the way they view me? Can I get them to see me in a different way by saying different things, by moving in a different way, by answering their questions or doing certain activities or avoiding certain activities? How do I avoid? This is all, the psychology of selling is more important than anything else. You know why? Ultimately in sales, what are we all trying to do? Trying to get somebody to make a decision. That's what you're trying to do. That's the easy part. Here's the bad part. When do people like making decisions? Never. That's when you know what the biggest decision that anybody ever makes? The decision to delay making a decision. You know what we're going to do? We're going to decide next year. We decided to push off making that decision. So not making a decision is not buying. But when you don't make a decision, you didn't say yes or no. You just said, well, we'll just so I continue to count on you, even though time passes and it's no longer a relevant thing. So the psychology of selling,
have an outright yes or no. Outright, like objection, or rather than saying, oh, this is interesting, let me think about it. It's like, well, actually, I don't like feature A, B, and C, but I like X, Y, and Z.
That would be great.
Valuable. Yeah.
And if they're at the middle of the buying process, they might come to you with that. But when they say things like, you know what, we've decided to push off the decision. You know what I just heard? No. And I move on. Here's what most people heard. There's still a chance. Therefore, the first thing I could not have to do so much of is that horrible prospecting work, which I don't like to do anyway. And I don't have to do it because this person didn't say the word no yet. Well, guess what? People say no in 100 ways. The actual utterance of the word no is the most rare of them. Bigger than that one is, let me talk to the others. No. Here's another one. Here, I tell salespeople that they often get kicked out of people's offices. And they go, how could that be? Yeah, no, you get kicked. But they don't kick you out by just kicking you out. No. They look at you with a smile and go, interesting. Can you get me a proposal? And you think, oh, wow, proposal, that usually comes closer to the close part of the sale. So they leave the office, and now you're standing on the sidewalk outside the building, and you're going, what? Wait a minute. A moment ago, I was in the office talking to the guy. Now I'm not in the office. I don't have an appointment to talk to the guy, but I have a homework assignment to produce a proposal, which, by the way, Frank, I don't even know what to write because I don't know what the other person will react to.
Yeah.
But if I have a choice between, I don't have enough time for prospecting and writing a proposal. What if I just spent all of my time on writing the world's greatest proposal? That's what they do. They spend so much time writing the proposal, they don't recognize. You just got to know, move on, call somebody else.
So I've got a question for you, Steve. So out of the people that you coach and help them improve their selling, what part of the sales process do they need the most help in? And what is the most common mistake you see, salespeople make that come to you? Like what is like, because you mentioned about like best practice, most common practice. What are the things in most common practice that, when you hear them, you're just like, no, we got to change this right now?
Well, the biggest thing that most people don't do is they focus on the detail, not the context. It's a great book called The Divided Brain that talks about your left hemisphere and your right hemisphere of your brain. Turns out that not only humans have brains like that, but all living things work in that same kind of way. Detail, context. A bird is building a nest. That's detail. But at the same time, it's got to pay attention as anybody's circling around above me while I'm distracted building this nest that's planning on attacking me while I'm not paying attention. Context. Context, detail. Most salespeople focus too much on the detail and not the context. So the context is this. Besides the one sale I'm working on, apart from whatever it is I'm doing, what does my sales pipeline look like? So I've got these leads, which are names on a piece of paper, digitally perhaps. I've got customers, and somewhere in the middle is my pipeline. The sales that I'm going to get are coming from that pipeline. If I exaggerate what's in the pipeline, I will mislead myself into thinking I've got more in the pipeline than I really have. What do people do when they think they have more in the pipeline than they do? They act like they haven't. And so they stop. The first thing that they stop doing is prospecting. Analogous to this would be looking for a job. If you're looking for a job and you're desperate and you're sending out CVs or resumes, and you don't think you're going to get a job offer tomorrow or today, you know what you'll do? You'll continue to send out CVs and resumes. But if you actually thought that somebody was going to offer you a job, you'll likely stop sending out CVs and resumes. Why? Because you thought something was going to happen. Well, most people's understanding of their pipeline is skewed. So what I do, for the most part, almost always first thing, is let's understand what your pipeline looks like, not from a subjective way, not from I get a good feeling about this one, but from an objective way. Let's look at the most objective standards. Do you have a next step? Is the sale within a normal selling cycle? And then I add unique features to their pipeline that would be particular to their business. So once they understand what their pipeline looks like, I teach them not only, it's depressing, by the way, because you always think you had this much, and I'm going to show you only have this much. Yeah. But what you need to learn is, okay, then how do I build the pipeline? So I show them how to build not just how to get prospect, not just how to close it, how to build the pipeline. And if you could focus on building the pipeline, you will get the sales you want.
Yeah. Right. So we focus on building the pipeline. So then, is it just that they almost take the foot off the gas because, you know, things are going well? A few people have given me some subjective indicators of interest. But really, how do you ascertain then, like when you come in and then, you know, you say, let's say you're helping me out. You say, all right, Suraj, talk me through your pipeline. What do you, if I talk about a particular deal, what do you suggest that, yes, this is actually highly likely to close? Good stuff, good work. And I tell you about another one, like, you know, Steve, I got a really good feeling about this one. What do I have to say that makes you think, hey, look, Suraj, this isn't all happening? I'm not, okay. Like, trust me, I've got the experience here. This deal's not happening.
Yeah. So the first thing you got to understand is I have literally trained, coached, managed, and mentored more than 50,000 people.
Wow.
And many of them, I have looked at their pipelines, and many of them I've looked at the pipelines multiple times. And in so doing, I've said, tell me about this sale, tell me about that sale. And this is for companies all over the planet, so every region on the planet, and across every industry vertical. So I've heard a million stories of, let me tell you about this. And what's interesting is sales stories become like literature. In literature, they say there's 5 books ever written, and every book is just some variation of one of those 5 books. In that same way, there's like 6 sales stories that ever happened. And everybody, you know, it's just different variations. So the first thing I'm able to do is hear the pattern. And I teach people to hear the pattern. So here's the pattern I mostly hear. I met with them. They have a tremendous need. They hate their current provider. And therefore, I'm projecting this with a 50%, 80%, 90% chance of closing. And then I'll ask these kind of questions. Do you have a next step? Well, I don't have a next step. Well, my next step is to call them. No, but did they agree to a next step? Well, they didn't agree to a next step. Well, guess what? If they didn't put your name in their calendar, they didn't even put your name in their calendar. They didn't even do that. What makes you think they're going to send you a check? What makes you think they're going to send you a signed contract? They didn't even do that little step. So let's take a harder look at that from a point of view of when could we expect to get paid from that client? You still think, like they go, well, we're using the competitor, but we hate them. I used to, you know what I used to hear in my head when people said to me, we're using your competitor, but frankly, we hate, you know what noise I hear? And I ask people all over the world, what noise do you hear in your own head? Cha-ching. I've asked people in Shanghai, what do they hear? Cha-ching. I've asked people in Brazil, what do you hear? Cha-ching. Even though cha-ching is not an actual word, that's what everybody in sales hears. And I used to hear that too, until I pulled that apart. Wait a minute. When the customer says, I'm using your competitor, but I hate them, what should I learn? They hate them, but they're still paying them. Hate them and still. I often want to say to a customer, really? I'll tell you what, how about hate me and pay me? Since you're hating them and paying them, why not hate me and pay? Or, love them, and because right now you're loving me, but you're not paying me. I'd rather hate me and pay me, kind of a thing. So, so you gotta look at this object. Do you have a next step? Is the sale within your normal selling? Well, yeah, this one's, as soon as anybody says this one's different, I already discount the sale. Because what does that mean? This one's different. What do you mean? It's different from the stories of sales that normally close, making it very similar to the stories of sales that don't normally close. Why would you want any of those stories? Wouldn't you want every sales story in your pipeline to be boringly similar to the stories of sales that close? And if so, this is what it would sound like. I met, then I showed a proposal, then they had me meet with their principals, and the next thing you know, we're talking about a contract. Why would a sale move like that? Because the customer wants the sale to move like that. If the customer doesn't want the sale to move like that, it won't move like that. So if it's not moving like that, we have to say to ourselves, why is it moving like that? The customer must not want it to do that. Therefore, I can't count on the sale.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm abbreviating what would take a full day session, but you have to teach. There's two things you got to teach. One is what can you count on? And you can only count on things with the next step within your normal selling cycle. And you've got to discount everything. But the other thing that you've got to look at is when you look at a pipeline, you're looking at a snapshot. You're looking at one frame of a movie. In a movie, there's 24 frames per second. So that's kind of what the pipeline is. You're looking at one instant. Now, if you could look at it in full motion, what you'd see is there's some flow of things coming in and there's some flow of things coming out. As I close sales, they're coming out. Watch that again. When I close a sale, it stops being a prospect. So my best prospect just closed, and I not only lost a prospect, I lost my best prospect. When should I have started to think about losing that prospect? Today? No. I needed to start thinking about losing that prospect 2 months ago. In fact, the moment they said, we're going to think about it and give you a decision next week, I should have started replacing that one in my head. Because either they're going to decide to go with me, or they're going to decide to not go with me, or they're going to decide to not decide. In either case, it's going to stop being a prospect, and I need to start replacing it. So the reason that they're not replacing it fast enough is they're not visualizing this movement. I'm not trying to close everything in my pipeline. I'm just trying to maintain a pipeline. In fact, here's a question. Here's a question that'll change everybody's. When you look at your pipeline, what question should you be asking yourself? And this changed my whole business. The question you should be asking yourself when you look at your pipeline is, what is my pipeline supposed to look like? What would it look like if everything was on track? That means I've got to take my goals, reverse engineer what my pipeline would have to look like to hit those goals. And then every week, not only pick apart my pipeline in this very objective way, but compare it to the ideal pipeline, and then do a gap analysis and change your time management so that you can make your real pipeline look more like your ideal pipeline. And that's what I help people do.
And for people that are not, clued in on the intricacies of sales and the sort of procedural way of thinking about sales, because from what I've understood from many conversations with people like yourself in this series is, sales is very procedural. It's very there is a very huge human element to it, but you got to stick to the process. There's a process, and day by day you got to come in, hit your quotas of what you're trying to do, and keep things moving. So it's not just like, oh, I made a sale, I can go have a beer now and take a break. But it's like, right, let's keep it moving along. Or you get 10 rejections on cold calls. All right, cool. I said I'll do 15 a day just because I did 5 today, and the first 5 are like great. First 5 all want to move to the next step. I'm going to skip the next 10. But then for the next 7 days, all 15 people you call are like, nope, sorry. Well, then you're going to wish that, on that day that you were doing well, that you hit more, right? So for people that are not too aware with that, what are the most agreed upon stages of a pipeline?
Oh, well, again, best practice, most common practice. I teach people that there's really 4 stages to a pipeline, and it's easiest to look at it from the end of the pipeline going toward the beginning. So there's obviously close, but before there's close, there's these 4 steps. Almost closed, which I call 90%, where I'm waiting for a contract to come in. The stage before that is before I get a promise that a contract is coming in, I get an announcement that they've decided they're going to tell me when they're going to make a decision. Not that they're going to make it, but I know when they're going to make a decision. And by the way, if I know when they're going to make a decision, I also know the answer to this question. If they're going to make a decision, let's say at the end of the month, why are they going to make a decision at the end of the month? I mean, I know why I want them to make a decision, but why are they going to make a decision at the end of the month? So I have to understand their underlying timetables. Before I would get to that stage, I would be at the getting information stage, which is where I'm going to be most of the sale, what I call less than 50%, 25%. And this is where I'm still gaining information, but I've got a next step. And by the way, this is a stage where most people use the word qualified. Here's another place where people go wrong. Every salesperson on the planet uses the word qualified. So I like in my classes to ask dumb questions. I use the Socratic method of teaching by asking people, I go, qualified. What does qualified mean to you? And when you ask enough salespeople, here's what the answer they give you. Well, it means that they could potentially have a need. They could potentially find my solution relevant. Okay, good. Check that box. And they could potentially pay for it. Okay. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time based on that, when was the last time you met anybody that was not qualified? Isn't everybody potentially have a need? Isn't everybody potentially have a way of paying for it? Of course they do. So therefore, that's not a good enough definition of qualified. Qualified to me.
Could I give that one a crack before you tell me?
All right, go ahead.
I think it would be interesting to maybe test my knowledge from speaking to a number of salespeople. So I'd say qualified, if someone's qualified, it's that you've identified they have the problem, it is a real problem, and they're actively trying to solve the problem, and hence need a good solution to that problem. That to me would suggest, right, this person is ideal for us to directly sell to.
This is why I'm in the sales training business and you're in the podcast business. Because if you said that to me and you were one of my, I'd say, okay, let me ask you a question. You say they're looking for a solution.
Right.
Okay. And this is in 2023.
Yeah.
So presumably they have the internet on every single device.
Yeah.
Have you ever used the internet to find the answer to a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All the time. Every single time you have a question, you look it up on the internet. And when you do, how long does it take you to find an answer?
Fairly quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah, that's my experience too. You go right there, you get it. And by the way, somebody else might tell you I found a different answer, but you will find a satisfactory answer if you look for a couple of. I mentioned this because you told me that this customer has been looking for a long time.
Yeah.
Do they use the internet? Because if they use the internet, then here'd be my next question.
Okay.
When you say you've been looking for a long time, Mr. Customer, Ms. Customer, how come you haven't picked a solution yet? And then you're going to get an answer that sounds like this. Well, see, the thing is, the thing that is, that's why they haven't bought. Now, if I don't uncover why they have, in a world where they are surrounded by the internet, they could find all the answers they could possibly find, why they still, you know what, if I don't understand that, then I also won't understand why they won't make a sale with me.
Right.
But here's what I know. You've been armed with the internet. You've been looking forever. You're surrounded by solutions. For whatever reason, you're not able or willing to make a decision. Mm-hmm. How is that going to help me? Okay. So I'm not saying your answer is wrong. I'm saying that tactically, you're describing what should be happening in the meeting. You're trying to probe and, how urgent is the problem and how big and real and, So hopefully, what I'm really trying to figure out is like, is this something you're going to be buying soon, or someday, or never, or just talk about? But I'll give you another.
what
Okay.
if they haven't actively said they are looking for a solution, right? Because you sort of focus the rebuttal of
Right.
my suggestion on that,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
But they're telling you almost in commercial terms that this is a problem. Like, yeah, we're wasting a lot of money on
Right.
generate. Like, let's say it's a lead generation solution or something like
Right.
that.
Right. Right.
You know, we're wasting a lot of time. Our conversion of leads from our SDRs to actual demos and meetings is very poor. Yeah, you know, we don't have a solution for this internally. So we've tried X, Y, and Z, whatever, right? So they're not said we're looking, but you know, in commercial terms, you're thinking, wait, I've got something that will save them time and money.
Right.
Would
Right.
that be
Right.
qualified?
Uh, when I used to think it was qualified
Okay,
until I started running my own business.
right.
As soon as I started running my own business, I had a new problem: getting paid. Because when you're running your own business, you're on the 100% commission program. There's no payroll. There's no paycheck. So even if you were working really, really hard, there's nobody to go to and go, boss, I was working really, really. I know, but there's no money
Yes.
until you get a set. So what I realized was there's a missing piece to that. And
Okay.
because I thought qualified is what you just said, I asked the kind of questions that help me tease out the need and the hole and the problem and how I could. I added another thing to qualify, changed everything. Because here's what I really, really, really want to know.
Mm.
Can you pull off a budget decision in the next 60 days? By the way, the 60 days was unique to my sale. You might say 30 days, or you might say 180 days, depending on what. But let's say in your scenario, the person describes their world in the way you just said. And I'm trying to figure out, could you pull off a decision, a money decision? And when I say pull it off, I mean either write me a check or influence the person who writes the check.
And you'd ask them that directly.
Well, I've got to find a way to do that. But I might, in this case, say, you know what? It sounds like you need leads. That's what I just heard you say. If I could provide you through my solution all the leads you need in the right way, the right number of leads, the leads that close in the right way, if I did all that, and the solution cost about $10,000 to $20,000, how do you think you'd react? Well, suppose the person goes, 10 to 20,000. Well, let's say your solution cost a minimum of 10. Well, what did you just learn? This may not work, or may not work with that person. We may have to get to a different person. Yeah. So I also recognize that people are in the buying process is three stages: top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. And depending on where you are, the customer will listen for different things. So if you're at the top of the funnel, you're listening intellectually to a sales message and you're trying to see if it's relevant or not, the customer. When the customer's in the middle of the funnel, they've already made a short list. And what they may do is expand that short list. So, for example, and by the way, you know who understands this really well? Cars. So the automotive industry has looked at, everybody buys a car. It's like the most common thing that people buy globally. So when you're in the top of the funnel, you're always influenced by the next car, even if you're not going to buy a car for 5 years, but you're only listening for intellectually what new, what things have. When you get to the middle of the funnels, when you go, well, if I buy a new car, it's either going to be the Toyota or the Ford or the Kia. And then as you're looking into it, you might add or a Volkswagen or this other car. But you'll end up falling in love with one of those choices. Well, it could be this one, could be this. I hope it's not the SUV. I hope it's the convertible. Really, I hope it's that one. But you fall in love. So picking one of you're listening in the middle of the funnel for how can I make a pick among the 5 finalists. And if I'm at the bottom of the funnel where I'm ready to take an action, I'm ready to buy a car this week. That's an auto intender in the world of cars. I'm listening for a reason I should take an action. So I'm listening for different. So one of the things that as a salesperson I need to recognize is where in the funnel are you, which is going to change what about my presentation you're listening to.
Yeah.
So it isn't as simple as I simply go in, probe to find the needs, show you how my solution matches up with your need, and abracadabra, sale.
Yeah, but
So
it's
that's
about
why the sale doesn't happen.
getting to the call to action, and the specific call to action here being the sale. Like,
Yeah,
are and when are you going to buy, and when can I get that decision to either
right. And
do the pipeline close you or
let's exactly. Now, let's say I learned from you that you were really at the top of the funnel, which means that no matter what I do, you're not going to suddenly decide to buy today if you started off at the top of the funnel. Maybe what I need to do is
as
nurture the lead.
as in you're at the top of my funnel, my buying
No, no,
process funnel, or
the customer, are at the top of the buying funnel. In other words,
okay, so
you're
it's our
far
first
from
is our
from
first
the point where you
interaction.
make it. Yeah. Well, when I say top of the funnel, I don't just mean with me. I mean top of the funnel
Oh,
for buying a
I'm still
service like
generally
that.
looking, right. So my buying process, I'm currently looking at a range of solutions that I'm nowhere near making a decision.
Right.
Right,
So if I
gotcha, yeah,
understand that, I understand in business that you might have 50 things on your plate.
yeah.
50 things that you go, well, I really want to address that. I really want to address that. And here's another, especially when you're a startup company, how many things do you need? I need 100 things, but I'm only going to get to about 8 of them this week. So that's what I'm trying to do. How do I get my thing to get into one of that short list of things you're going to get to this week or this month? And if I can't, then I have to find, maybe I need to nurture you until something changes. You know what really makes a customer qualified? I'll tell you more than anything else. It's hard to find this out, but if you can find this out, if the company that you're trying to sell to is changing. Because if there's nothing changing in their world, there's no reason for them to buy anything. There's no reason to buy anything today. There's no reason to switch anything, buy this from this vendor instead of that. But if something is changing, almost anything changing, it forces you to go, all right, we got to look at everything. We got to look at what tools do we have? What resource do we buy? What vendors do we work with? What partners do we have? Let's take a second look at all of those contracts. And that's when they tend to do things, when things are changing. So
Mm.
that's why I like to ask the question, what will be different this year than last year? What will be different next year than this year? What do you think will be different at the end of the year than the beginning of the year? Because I'm listening for, is anything going to be different? Is it changing or not changing?
Right. So changing environments on their side are a good indicator of
Yes.
opportunities.
Mm-hmm. In fact, it may be the only indication of, it may be the only time that they buy when things are changing. It isn't like they run out of things to do over there and they go, we're bored today. Let's change vendors. Let's buy this new service because I don't know what else to do. They have to make that decision.
Interesting. So, Steve, let's take a step back then and discuss, because that was actually really informative about the pipeline. This is the first time I've had a conversation about really scrutinizing your pipeline. I've discussed numerous different things of like identifying problems or, conversational techniques during calls to kind of reposition, reframe, or generating leads. But this is the first time, for me, even thinking about, all right, there's a pipeline, but let's bring a sense of urgency to the pipeline. Let's bring a sense of, hey, where is the money actually coming from? It's all well and good. You've got 10 people that want a demo and they all think it's really cool and they'll give you a decision in 6 months. But when are they going to say, okay, we're going to buy or we're not going to buy? Because that's ultimately what you're trying to do and move people along in that. But what conversational frame do you try to maintain with a prospect to get there quicker? Because one part of me is listening to you and thinking, all right, you want to have this sense of urgency, you want to move them along, and you want there to be that decision. But then the other part of me is thinking, but I don't want to come across too pushy. Yeah, I don't want to like pressure them, because then they might be like, look, they might just say no because I'm putting them under too much pressure.
Right.
So
right.
how do you create the environment between you and the prospect, the frame between you and the prospect to kind of make this harmonious? And I know what you might say is that we'll go back to the start, that sales is not like chemistry, so it's always different based on who you're talking to.
Yeah, well, I might have given that answer, but here's I think that some salespeople are actually making it harder than it needs to be, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to, in almost every meeting, convince the customer to buy.
Mm.
And that's a hard task. I mean, if you used it like a dating analogy, you would say that on the first date, I'm going to see if I could get the person to marry me.
Good
That's a
luck with
big
that.
leap. You know,
Oh yeah,
what would be a shorter step? Well, can I just get them to go on a second date with me? And
absolutely. Yeah.
I apply that exact same thing to sales. So when I go in a meeting, I'm not trying to convince them of anything. You know what I'm trying to do? At the end of the meeting, I'm going to try to schedule a next step. And if I could get you to agree to that next step, every time we meet, you might not have opened up in the first meeting because we were total strangers, but the second meeting, we know each other a little bit better. Our relationship is a little deeper. You didn't quite give me an answer. When you ask questions of customers, they abbreviate. They give you, need to know kind of answers. But the more you get to know them, they go, well, I told you this, but it's really that. I told you we didn't have a problem, but honestly, we kind of do have a problem. So when I started to measure how many times did I go on a meeting and actually walk away with a scheduled next step. And what I learned, and if you're trying to, here's another thing about sales. Sales is not really about sales. It's about improving because every single technique will work to some degree. So if you believe in challenger sales, and that's a great book, by the way, Challenger, I love the book. I love the concept.
Hmm.
I believe I'm a challenger salesperson. Does it
Okay.
work? Sometimes. Consultative selling, does that work? Yeah, sometimes. In fact, I don't even know if you could be a non-consultative salesperson, to be honest. But
Hmm.
so how about spin selling? Does that work? Yeah, that works sometimes. Every how-to sell program works. Here's the thing about sales that makes it not relevant how to sell. Everything works. You can open the window and scream out the window, "Hey, anybody want to buy my products today?" Maybe that'll work. If you send a million emails, maybe that'll work once. The problem is in sales, every year the goals go up. Every year the goals go up by 10%. So it's not just how do I get a sale? How do I get 10% more sales than I had last year? And I won't have 10% more time. So every year I'm trying to improve. So given that I'm trying to improve, what's the first thing I want to do to improve? Track. Tracking causes improvement. So I started tracking. How many times did I have a meeting and it resulted in, what I learned about myself? 7 meetings to get 1 scheduled next step. If I could improve that ratio, I could get more people to buy from me. So I focused on improving that ratio. So step 2, track and then pick a ratio you want to improve. How could I improve that ratio? What's going wrong? Why don't I have a next step? Well, the main reason I don't get a next step is because I'm in the last 10 seconds of a meeting. And that's when I remember, try to get a next step. Hey, as I'm putting my coat on and leaving hey, before I leave, how about getting together again next Tuesday at no? All right. Anyway, thought I did. See you. Bye. How I eventually improved it from 7 to 1 to 1.9 to 1.
Oh wow.
My next step ratio improved 4x. When I got 4 times better at getting somebody who saw me once to see me again, my sales jumped 4 times. Not by getting better at closing or presenting, but getting better at getting people to see me again.
And what
Well,
did you
how did I do
change?
that?
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, yeah.
my
That's the million
meeting
dollar question.
preparation. Yeah.
Right,
So
right.
what I years ago, I was an improvisational actor. So I was a professional on stage. We get an audience suggestion. Very good at making things up as I go along. But you know what I
Next,
learned? I mean,
next podcast is gonna have a different theme. Then we're gonna
okay,
get you on a different
all
thing.
right. Here's the suggestion. Um, so uh, so most salespeople rely on their improvisational skills when they shouldn't be, and I don't. And I'm skilled in this art. I say to myself, all right, let me go through a pre-meeting process. And I've got a 5-step pre-meeting process
Okay.
that includes research, what questions I'm going to ask, how I'm going to start the conversation. Literally, how am I going to start this conversation? What's the next step I'm going to ask for? And let me also remind myself, what does my pipeline look like again? Because the context of what my whole pipeline, because eventually, like if I have a pipeline meeting every Monday and this meeting is on Friday, this meeting we're about to have is going to be depicted by one little data point on my pipeline on
Yeah.
Monday. So I've got to be able to see the sale that I'm in. Where is it in the pipeline now? What spot am I trying to get it to or keep it
Yeah.
in? And
One thing
so,
you mentioned there, just to quickly comment about, how to actually start the conversation. That's a really interesting one for me because I've noticed, it's not exactly hard sales, but obviously running a podcast here, bringing different guests on. Part of that's selling the podcast idea, right? It's kind of saying, hey, look, we've got this thing going on where we have these discussions, and we think your insight would be great to have here. So in ways, it's a minor sale. You go through the same process, reaching out to people, emailing
Totally.
people, having
Absolutely.
introduction calls. And I've noticed, just on how you start that conversation, it really sets the vibe for the rest of the rest of the whole discussion, or even
Yeah.
the podcast. When somebody comes on and, this first question is like this combative question, or you kind of get straight into something like, oh, I saw your LinkedIn post and you said this. And it's like, whoa, I didn't know this was an interrogation I was stepping
Right.
into. Right.
Right. Obviously, that would change it.
Yeah, the whole vibe, right? Whereas
Yes.
more often than not, the first 5 minutes, we try to, usually it's me and my co-founder running the episodes together. Right now, he's doing his own series. I'm doing my own series on sales. He's doing one on deep tech. But start with it, always start with like a open, hey, how's it going, man? Or hey, what's up? How are you? How's the day? Or, something in the background. It's like, oh, once we had an individual came on, had a lot of guitars in the background. So we were just like, so did you play the guitar? That's awesome. Like, how long you been playing? Like, very multi-talented. Basically that first 5 minutes just sets the tone. And
Right.
it's a make or break, because you had this whole, process. You've identified, hey, they got all these problems. I'm sure I can help them. This person is ideal on paper, but you screw the whole thing up by just coming across too something in the first 5 minutes. It might be too serious, too lackluster, maybe even making a silly joke, and they weren't in a silly mood that day. And it's like, oh no, what have I done? Because now they think I'm a charlatan. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So that's why it is. So it's way more important. I mean, you realize it's important when you put it in that way.
Yeah.
It's way more, and therefore it's worth role playing. And but most salespeople hate role playing. But to me, role playing is they don't like role playing because they go, well, it's hard. Well, it is hard, but it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to replicate the same stressful situation you'll be in. It doesn't matter what words would come out of your mouth when you're not under stress, because in sales you're going to be under stress. So let me replicate a stressful situation and then try that opening line, and maybe I could, and almost everybody's got a bad take. So they say it, and then if it's a role play, I wouldn't say it that way. I would say it this other way. And then you go, oh yeah, I'm glad we're role playing it. So you try to maybe try two, three. Now when you're in real life and you start the meeting, you've actually given a practiced, even though it looks like it's even though it looks like you just thought of it. In fact, it's like a script. It's like the script that an actor has.
Yeah.
It sounds improvised. It's not improvised.
It's muscle memory, right? It's like you put yourself in that circumstance so many times that your mind and your body almost rises to the occasion. It's like, let's get into that frame that I've familiarized myself with ultimately, because if anyone plays any sports out there, they know that when you're playing a sport, you will sink back to, when you're under stress, you'll sink back to your average training session. How do you averagely perform in training? Or it'll be a spread. You'll never perform. Very rarely will you perform, two standard deviations outside of your norm in a game, or two below. It'll usually be somewhere in the middle. You'll fall back on how much you trained.
Exactly. Yeah. Sports is the best analogy for this. That's exactly right.
But it's interesting as well, just another analogy that I thought was quite useful, even when you're saying this now, is like dating, right? When you're going out there meeting women, like as a guy, if you're meeting women on dates, it's like a lot of men, when they first do that in their early 20s, they're stressed out. They're stressed out. They might start mumbling and stuttering. But then once you have been in that situation and you're comfortable and you realize, hey, you know what, this worked, and generally I feel comfortable in this kind of frame of mind, then it starts to come more naturally. But one thing that reminded me of that was that you'll react the same way under stressful situations are what you want to familiarize yourself with and get comfortable in.
Right. To change how you behave under stress, you got to practice and practice and practice and practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on that, then taking it back to sales, moving away from sports and dating, but like cold calling, what's the formula? How is it done? Because if someone is not jumping on calls, like myself, I'm not like jumping on calls every single day. I can do it. I have done it. It's something where it's one that's a bit nerve-wracking, right? It's like, I'm about to call this person. I have no idea whether they need what I'm trying to sell. I have no idea what mood they're in. They might just hang up. They might worst case, berate me on the phone and then hang up. Or
Right.
they might tell me, probably the worst of them all is that they might tell me that my product's useless and they can't see any need for this in the entire market, which
Right.
goes from a personal crisis to an existential one. Oh no, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing working on this
Mm.
thing that I've dedicated so much of my time and financial resources to? But like,
Right.
how do you get yourself in that frame? What would you say are the best practices for that? Not the most common, the best. And what's your take on that cold calling?
So my let me get myself comfortable here. My advice is, first of all, it's got pieces to the call. So the first piece of the call is, what is the reason that you're saying you're calling?
Mm,
So if you say that you're calling because you have a solution to a problem that you're sure they have, I think that you're running the risk of them going, well, I don't have that problem and I'm not interested in that. And, it going all off course.
yeah.
So I need to change the reason to something that you would not be, that you not only wouldn't immediately object to, but you actually might be interested in.
Hmm.
So I called you and I said, I have a solution that works for a company like yours. And I'd like to show you what it is. Not, I'd like to show it, and if you like it, you could buy it too. Which is, I'm basically saying, hey, I'd like you to sit still while I try to close you on a sale. If I go, the reason I'm calling is, I thought we're working with a company that's down the block from you, very similar to yours. At least
Yeah.
it seems like it is. They had this problem, and we offered this solution and solved the problem. I'd love to show it to you. It's a story. I'd like to show it to you. So I'm actually reducing down what it is I'm not describing the whole sale, just the, okay. So, but no matter what you say, they're going to come back with some version of an objection. And the objection, even though it could be any number of things, boils down to these four: not interested, happy now, just send me something. Well, they ask a direct question. Well, how much is it? Hi, this is Steve. How much is it? I didn't want to get to it yet, but how much is it? So what I do is I teach people. I start by making them list every objection they get.
Yeah.
I then show them how each objection, even 50 objections, all boil down to those four categories.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, based on that, let's talk about how to turn around those objections.
What were the four? You said not interested, just send
not
me
interested.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. So not interested is I have no time, I have no interest, I have no money, that's not interested. Happy now is we're already using a service. We do it in-house. We're buying from the ABC company, the XYZ company. Send me something. Because you know what? Sounds like just put it in the mail or just email me. And then direct question would be a direct question. So by identifying the objections and then showing them in slow motion how do you turn around, and then practicing the art of turning around the objections in a comfortable, non-combative way. Here's the opposite of the non-combative way. Hi, this is Steve. Steve, we're not interested. How do you know you're not interested? Because I think I'm not interested. Well, I bet you're wrong. I think you would be interested. Well, I think you're wrong. No, I think you're wrong. So, having an argument at the beginning of the call is not what you want. You want an agreement at the beginning of the call. I know a lot of people initially think it's not interesting until they see the benefits. Can I ask you what you're doing now to improve productivity? Well, we're not doing anything to improve productivity. A lot of people aren't. They find this real benefit. I don't think we can afford it. I know a lot of people think it's beyond their ability to pay until they see how we could work within your budget. I'd love to show you how that works as Tuesday at 3. So once you practice and practice and when you finally get really good at it, you get on the phone and it almost doesn't matter what they say, because as soon as they go into an objection, you know what to say.
Yeah.
Knowing what to say when the customer says the worst case scenario words builds confidence.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So it's like the best practice way to come back from each of these. And it's nice that you broke it down into 4 categories of objections, right? Because otherwise there's, in the non-trained mind, there's millions of objections that could come. So how the heck am I gonna reframe all of them? But I like that each one of them really starts with emotional intelligence. Like, I know it's expensive because, products like this tend to deliver a lot of value, but I'm sure there's a way we could work within your budget. So I would love to see what you're doing now, and I'd love to show you how we can add to that. Just reframing the whole thing.
Yeah. And you get better and you smooth it out, you make it less threatening and less salesy and less pushy. And eventually you get to the point where when I call you on the phone, I'm not even asking you if we could get together. I'm really trying to nail down when the meeting is going to be, because I'm going to make it so irresistible to meet and also so not threatening.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you to buy from me. I'm not telling you that I'm going to try to sell it to you. I don't even know if I'm ever going to get you. I just want to tell you a story that I think you would find interesting and relevant and valuable because it's about somebody like you with the kind of a problem that companies like you tend to have. I'm not saying you have it. I'm not even saying you should buy it. I'm just,
yeah.
But the other thing, and in echo selling, I point this out. In today's world, I call you on the phone. What are the odds you're going to pick it up? Reduced.
Yeah.
If I had a comprehensive email marketing strategy, then called you, you'd more likely pick up the phone. If I had a comprehensive social selling before I did the email marketing, you'd more likely open the email. So I describe in echo selling how to develop an echo selling campaign with social selling, then email marketing, then phone prospecting.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I address in echo selling is if they're going to ask you a question, if they're wondering about anything, you know what they're wondering about? What problems do you solve? What makes you different? What makes you better than anybody else? And what makes you worth the money? I got an email yesterday from somebody who was trying to sell me SEO services. She said, I could help you do blah, blah, blah with our SEO services. I said, what's the ROI? She ignored the question. I asked it a second way. She didn't. I said, let me explain again. I'm going to ask you a third time. How do I make more money than I spend with you? That's what everybody's wondering. Nobody's not wondering that. And so instead of hoping they don't answer or assuming that they'll forget that they wonder about that, let's walk into every meeting with a super great, repeatable answer to what problems do we solve, what makes us different, what makes us better, and what's the ROI. Why do I want a repeatable answer? Because, first of all, the answer, well done, extends value, communicates our brand. But if you have to talk to your boss, what words will you use? The words I provided for you. If I gave you a repeatable way of saying it. I spoke to Steve Bookbinder. Oh, what does he do? Well, he solves this kind of a problem. Yeah, but we have a guy like that. What makes him different? Well, he said, some variation, some version of what I said is what you're going to say, and that's what's going to make the meeting work. I mean, your meeting with your circle of influence will work. So if you put all these pieces together, it's not just the phone call. It's not just the turnaround. It's the context of the whole personal marketing strategy, the echo selling campaign that makes the phone call the icing on the cake and makes it work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And where do you think? I think we're a few minutes over, but I'm really enjoying the conversation. So kind of just let it flow. But a question I have before we sort of the last 5 minutes kind of wrap up is in that whole network of things you need to be doing, the call, the campaign, the way you speak to them, the way you reframe objections, their network of influence, understanding who that is, to taking into account the details as well as the context. Where do most sellers fall back on? Where is it that they're lacking? Like what aspect of that do people do badly? Do you ever find that, hey, you know what, after about 6 months of training, most people are able to call very well, they kind of master the calling part, but they're very poor at understanding who the circle of influence is? Or what would be the things that people tend to do well and then people tend to do not so well?
I don't mean to be too insulting, but I meet a lot of salespeople who I jokingly ask, do you already know how to sell? I like this start. And they go, oh, yeah, I know how to sell. And of course, everybody knows how to sell because selling, in a sense, is easy. Just have a conversation. Yeah. By the way, here's why most people don't know how to sell. In my view, they don't, because they started off with the wrong understanding of what selling is. What's selling? I ask 50 people what selling is. You get a definition all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. You'll even get people saying, I'm not a salesperson. I'm a librarian, but I'm actually in sales because I've got to convince my boss to give me a bigger budget. So that people want to confuse persuading somebody with selling.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of sounds like it, and certainly persuasion is a piece of it. Here's professional selling. You ready? Hitting a certain number by a certain date. Hitting a certain number by a certain date is professional selling. When I hit a certain number by a certain date, you know what I do? I pay the rent. I make enough money to pay my mortgage, my rent, pay for the food, pay for my family. If I don't do that, I can't pay for all those things. So it's not just that I close one sale, it's that I produce lead flow and deal flow. So with that in mind, I've now take a second look at the people's tactics. Most people have terrible prospecting tactics. You look at their email marketing. First of all, you look at their social selling. I told you in the beginning, terrible. They start selling right away. Okay. Email marketing, same thing. In the book, I describe an email that's got 4 gates. And the gate, if you open the gate, the reader comes in. You close the gate, the reader. Here's the first gate, the subject line. Most people have a terrible subject line, and that's why the gate is closed. They don't even open the email. The second gate is just the first sentence of the email. Terrible first sentence. And that's why that gate is closed. And I outline the rest of the book. And then with regard to phone calls, their tactics of getting on the phone. What's the reason you're going to call? And what does it have to do with the lead source? Because the actual articulation of the reason has to do with the lead source. And then how are you going to turn around the objection? So most people don't have objection handling skills. They don't have a call development skill. They don't have a way of tracking what they're doing. Without tracking, they can't improve. They're tracking the wrong thing, or they can't track, or they don't track. So I find that there's about 50 things that I can help somebody do with, but it all starts with the pipeline, but everything else is the tactic of, and there's one other thing, and it's sort of like in sports in this way. I'm a swimmer. When I want to go faster, I don't think about going faster. I think about the correctness of my stroke. Now, a swimming stroke doesn't have that many moving parts, but every part can get screwy. Did I lift my elbow up high enough? Did I put my hand in the right angle? Did I stretch out enough? Did I rotate my body? Did I push all the way through? How many strokes am I taking across the pool? By focusing on the mechanics, I stay positive. By focusing on the results, I tend to get depressed. That's a problem in sales because our results are almost always depressing. Because let's say you're a really, really, really good salesperson. You're closing 1 out of 3, which means 2 out of 3 are not buying.
Yeah.
Everything you do works a small portion of the time and doesn't work most of the time.
Yeah.
So you could be easily depressed. And when you get depressed, you start to settle into, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, that you try something once, it doesn't work. That didn't work. So you're constantly giving up on every new idea and going back to something that you feel comfortable doing, even though it doesn't work, and talking yourself into it. So this notion of let's always be reinventing ourselves, and no matter what it is, the goals are always going up. My results need to go up. I need to come up with a different number by a different date. And the only way I'm going to do that is focus on tactics. So I need a million tactics. And so that's what I do. People thought that a phone call had like 1 moving part. I told them it's got 10 moving parts. The people thought that getting ready for a meeting, what do? You just show up, right? You get the directions and you go. No, it's 5 things that you ought to be doing. So by giving them these tactics psychologically, you know what I've just done? And showing them how to build a pipeline, I've gone from, I'm trying to make you happy in your career as a salesperson. If I can make you happy in a world where you're going to be depressed all the time, that's a good thing. Well, most people only get happy when 2 things happen. 1, they have something to look forward to. And 2, the thing that they were looking forward to happened. What I teach you to do is the third and most important and most powerful one. How to create the next thing to look forward to. My pipeline is a mechanism, a machine that produces the next thing I'm going to look forward to. Most people, the thing that they're looking forward to is in somebody else's court, in their house.
Yeah.
I'm going to hire, I'll let you know whether we'll hire you next week. I hope he hires me. I'm looking forward to hearing what he's going to say. But if he says no, I'm going to be depressed. Well, can I give myself things I'm looking forward to? And that's what I figured out how to do. And I figured out why that's so important in sales, because offsetting this tidal wave of rejection that we get, and the depression that follows it, and how it slows us down and causes us to not experiment and not try and not have fun with the game, changes our future success and derails our efforts. So you got to fight the psychological battle of sales. So to do that, you've got to be your own coach and your own cheerleader. So in a sense, that's what I do. I teach you how to be your own coach and how to be your own cheerleader. To celebrate the things celebrate everything that you can celebrate. Find something. Why are you tracking anything? To find something new to celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah, that point there is extremely fascinating, because when you mentioned the first two things, immediately what came to mind is sort of neurologically, right? The two neurotransmitters that you've got sort of inferred there was when you look forward to something, it's dopamine. You're secreting dopamine to kind of like look forward, and the promise of reward. Ultimately, they sort of dubbed that neurotransmitter, the promise of reward. Then when it happens, it's happiness, serotonin. It's like, oh, it's happened. You feel that elation. Okay, great. They're two very different things. It's like when you're trying to reach a sports goal or any kind of goal, it's like, okay, if I keep working hard, this thing's going to happen. And when it happens, it's a completely different feeling. It's not as like engaging to push you, but it's a celebratory feeling. But what you're saying there is the strategic plan, the longevity of goals. Don't just have one. It's like a single sale. You'll feel great happiness after making a single sale, but you want longevity after that sale. So what is the next thing that you keep pushing forward to?
Right.
Like a great example is a heavyweight boxer, right? Tyson Fury. If you've heard the name, he's come to America a few times to fight. So he went into it. He became the world champion, beat Vladimir Klitschko back in 2015. And then he spiraled into a deep depression and, lost his way, so to say. And when he came back from it, what he said was that, I just didn't have anything anymore. I had achieved the heavyweight championship of the world. I'd become, so to say, the baddest man on the planet. I'd become everything I always dreamed of, and I felt empty. There was nothing left. There was nothing left for me to do. There was no continuation. He didn't create the next thing to look forward to. I've got to the top. I've got to the pinnacle. What else is there for me here? You know what I mean? But then when he came back, he said, the thing that's changed for me now is that I look forward to training every day. I look forward to the process, not to the goal. I look forward to ticking off small wins on the process along the way, rather than the Hail Mary finale. So I thought that was really interesting. When you parallel it with
absolutely, we can learn a lot from studying champions, because what they did is they overcame that rejection that stopped everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, and the ones that stay there for long periods of time, like your Michael Phelps, Roger Federer, the two sisters from the States. I've forgotten their names now. The tennis
Serena and
Serena Williams sisters,
right.
Absolutely, the Williams sisters, and you can learn a lot from those champions that stay there for decades. They establish themselves, and no matter what it is, it's like, no, I'm still going to show up to train. I'm still going to show up to practice like I'm a beginner.
Yeah. In fact, they're going to outwork anybody else. That's what they're going to do. They're not just going to be at practice. They're going to be the hardest working person in practice.
Yeah. Even though they're the champion, even though everyone else wants to be like them, they're like, well, let me give you a reason to want to be like me, because I didn't become like this for no reason. Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, listen, this has been a really engaging, really interesting conversation. Thanks a lot for joining me. Just the last minute here. Is there anything you'd like to shout out, name drop, anything for people to find you online?
I'd love for you to check out my book, Echo Selling, which is whatever your favorite online bookstore is, you could find it there. But if you just wanted to read a description of it, come to my website, which is www.stevebookbinder.com. Pretty easy website. And if you want to reach me, I'm Steve at stevebookbinder.com. I hope I gave your listeners something to help them in their success.
Fantastic. Thank you.